first thing I want is just kind of like a bio, okay?
A bio.
So what I'd like is for you, my name's Terry Fitzgerald. My parents are John and Anna Fitzgerald.
Yeah.
And my siblings are this, and that, and so forth.
Who are my siblings?
Who are your siblings?
Yeah.
Everyone, including Danny.
See, I had, let's see, I don't know.
So go ahead and say it.
Yeah. You ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. My name is Terry Fitzgerald, and my dad was John Fitzgerald, and my mother was Anna Fitzgerald, and I have 7 brothers and sisters. There's John and Mary and Danny, who died young, and Mike, or Tom and Mike, and Sheila and Pat and Peg. I got them all, I think, yeah.
Who are you married to? Who's your spouse and your children?
My spouse, or I'm married to Martha Greiner from, she lived over in Lisbon, Iowa. We have 4 children. Terence, or Terry, lives out in Clarkson, Washington, and Tammy lives in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, and Travis, who still lives at home, is in the Marine Corps Reserves, and Tanya, who lives right down the road here, right? Yeah, okay?
You're doing great.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Tell me, you're retired now, but tell me a little bit about what you did.
Right, I was a lineman for the power company for 42 years. I climbed poles for a living. That's basically what it amounted to. Yeah.
Tell me,
And,
go ahead, I'm sorry.
no, I was just going to say, working on high voltage lines and setting poles and stringing a wire and basically things like that. My last probably 10 or 12 years I spent as a troubleshooter, which is spent a lot of nights, and storms and snowstorms and rainstorms and lightning and all that kind of stuff. There goes Travis. I think it was Travis.
Now he's famous.
Yeah.
Tell me about your school for your occupation, school, or where you went to school.
My school, first I went up here to grade school to Garryowen School, 1 through 8 grades, and then I went into Omaha to Creighton Prep for my high school, and then I didn't continue on to college because during high school my dad died. So I decided to stay home and farm for when I first got out of school, but that didn't pan out very well. So I went down to the UP shops, worked for a couple of years, and got laid off. And actually, that's where I got started in the electrical thing. I went down to the UP shops and found out when we got there that we had a cousin that was a general shop foreman down there, and he was the one that made Mike and I, got us in the electrical apprenticeship down there. And then after I got laid off, I went up to the power company and made application up there, and before the railroad called me back, I got a call from the power company to come to work, so I went to work for the power company. And I worked in the substation department there for a couple of years. Then I got drafted and went into the service. And when I come out of the service, well, actually, my brother Mike was home here doing the farming and working same time, and he had an accident with the tractor and tipped it over on himself up here in the creek and was laid up. So I made application to get out of the Army early, and I got out like 2 months early and come home. And then I went back to power company to get my job back, and work had kind of fallen off in the substation department, so they transferred me in the line department. And then I went through my apprenticeship and all that stuff in the line department and ended up worked my way up to journeyman lineman, and then got to be a service crew foreman, and then they changed the classification to a troubleshooter, and that's where I decided to stay. I didn't take any. I could have been promoted, but I didn't take them. I liked the troubleshooting job. Just kept the troubleshooting job till my retirement. 42 years later, I retired. 42 years after I started there. So.
Now you're a golfer.
Well, part-time, yeah.
Tell me a little bit about when you and Mike farmed. Tell me how you kind of talked about it a little bit. Could you talk why you kind of went into it? And,
Well, it was just like the reason why we went farming, because that's all we knew, and then my dad died, and so there was nobody here to do the farming, so we started doing the farming. But we didn't, I think only 1 or 2 years that we didn't. And then Uncle Jim and Uncle Danny helped us out, and there was just no way that we were going to make any living farming, so that's why we decided to go to town and get a job. Yeah.
So speaking of farming, and Uncle Danny and Uncle Jim, do you have a story? Is there a little story about it?
Like, well, I got lots of stories, but I don't know what kind of stories you're looking for.
Funny stories?
Well,
bad stories that don't
well, I don't know. It's like, well, one thing, like Mike, of course, I worked my whole life with Mike, and he was always getting hurt. He was just, it was just his nature. Every time he turned around, he got hurt. He dumped the tractors over a couple of times, and well, first off, he was diabetic, which had nothing to do with him getting hurt, because he just could get hurt. He managed to get hurt no matter what. He'd broken arms, broken legs, he just was getting hurt. And Tom, of course, Tom was crippled, but he had to keep up with it. He'd go out in the field with us, and sit at the end of the row, if nothing else, when we were doing things. And when we were out in the, like, shocking oats or something like that, he would go to the field with us and sit there and keep the water jug under a shock or something. But he always went. He always went when we were thrashing. He would go and he would sit on the tractor and do what he could do, but he couldn't do much. But he always went with us, And yeah, well, I was just Sheila. I guess I kind of know if I had any funny stories about Sheila or not. Any stories, but and Pat, she was always crying all the time. She was but her and Peg were always buddy-buddy. Wherever you found Pat, you found Peg, or vice versa. And Peg, of course, she was nutty over the horses, and she would, we'd bring the horses in from working. In fact, when we rented this, of course, my dad was still alive then, but we had rented the farm up the road here, and we used to plant the corn, and then we had to harrow the corn with the horses, and Mike and I would be up there with 2 teams and 2 harrows and harrowing the corn. And Peg was probably 3 years old at that time. I don't know how old we were. We weren't very big, but so we'd put Peg on the harrow, and she would drive the horses across the field, and one harrow, and then we'd drive the other harrow, and then but she rode on the harrow. We had to walk behind it, but she rode on the harrow. So when she'd get to the end, it was kind of hard to turn the harrow around, because if you turned too short, it would tip over, and one end of digging the ground. So we would turn them around, turn the horses around for her, and get them back on the row, and head them back across the field with Peg, and then of course we would come back walking behind the other harrow, and then when we got to the other end, then in other words, Mike and I took turns. We only had to make every other trip. Peg had to make every trip, but she rode on the harrow, and she'd come in, she'd be covered with dirt from one end to the other from sitting on the harrow, but then when we'd come in from the hayfield or something like that, unhook the horses, we had the water tank up the top of the hill up here. And we had an old horse named Doc. And she always wanted to pull Doc to water, because we'd have to take the horses to water and pull Doc to water. And so, that was a good word for it, because you practically had to pull him. He wouldn't lead. He was so slow. He was a big old had the hooves on him about that big, but she'd always be out there wanting to pull Doc to water, and she's been nutty over, excuse me, been nutty over horses ever since, you know. So who have I skipped?
Who have you skipped? Mary and Johnny.
Well,
they were older.
Yeah. Yeah, I just remember Johnny with the horses, disking with the horses, and well, doing general farm work with the horses. Johnny did quite a bit of work with horses, and when he was about 17, I think he joined the Army, and he was gone for 3-4 years, and then Mary.
Was that a draft then?
What?
When Johnny joined the Army?
No, he joined the Army, I think. Yeah.
Do you know why he joined the Army, or what was his decision to do that?
No, just being a kid. I don't know. Probably got tired of following the horses around. I don't know. You know, but just yeah, there was no reason. I just wanted to join the Army, I guess. And then Mary. Well, when I can't think of anything. No, she used to just be around. We used to take walks and things like that. But then her and I, when I went to high school in Omaha, her and I stayed in Omaha. She was working at that time, worked down to Mutual of Omaha or someplace. But she worked and I went to school, and we stayed at 2215 Spencer Street at Dorsey's, they were a friend of my mom's, and then we left there in the middle of the year, and we went down to 1403 Brown Street and stayed with Purnell's for the balance of that year. And I don't know if I only stayed 1 year in town, and then I got a learner's permit, and I drove back and forth. And Mary, she got her teacher's certificate, and she taught school up here at the Slater School. And she rode the bicycle back and forth to school, and then she bought a car, and I think that might have been the car I was driving back and forth to school. And I don't.
How old were you?
What?
How old were you?
I was 14 when I started driving back and forth to school, and then I think Johnny came home from the Army and he got a job down at the UP, and then we rode back and forth with him. But Mary, she rode the bicycle back and forth, and she also rode. She rode a horse, and she put Tom on the horse and would take him up here to Garryowen School, and then she would get on the horse and ride on up to Slater School where she was teaching. And then coming back, she would, I don't remember, but we used to, when we first started school, we started to the country school, and Tom, well, of course, I was a year or two ahead of him, and then Tom started to school. So he couldn't walk, of course, so we put him in a coaster wagon to pull him to school. Well, I couldn't, when the weather would get bad and the roads were muddy, I couldn't pull him by myself. So they sent Mike along to push. Well, the teacher said as long as and then he'd have to come to school and help me bring him home. So the teacher said, well, you just as well go to school as long as you're coming and going every day. So he started in first grade, like when he was 4 years old. That's why he graduated from high school when he was like 15, you know. In fact, he was too young to get a job. He had to be 16 to get a job, and he couldn't even get a job then. Till he turned 16, you know. But yeah, and when the weather was decent, we pulled him in a wagon, and then in the wintertime, we pulled him on a sled. I don't know why he never froze to death. Well, we'd get off playing and leave him laying there in the snow, you know. We did. We just, he never. I don't know. He had to be tough, 'cause yeah, yeah. There's a lot of. He was tough. He. We used to play hockey up here in the creek, and he played goalie, and how he could sit on that ice for hours on end is more than I can understand. But I think he kind of paid for it in his older years. But he was tough. He could take it. I don't know how he did it, but he did it. He walked with the crutch for a long time. He got crutches. I remember we were going to school. You walked from here with the crutches, and then one crutch broke, and he walked with one crutch for a while, and then I remember right up the road here, we were going to school one day, and that other crutch broke. And he just threw it in the ditch and walked. After that, didn't exactly walk, staggered. But he could navigate without he'd take some terrible crashes every once in a while, but he'd always get up and go again, but without the crutches, but he could. And then when he got into college, then somebody introduced him to a cane, and he had one of those. Well, you remember when he had the cane, so yeah.
Well, describe what it was like kind of growing up in a large family. I mean, I suppose Mary and Johnny were gone by then, but...
No, Mary was here. Johnny was, well, he was around, but I don't remember all that much about when we lived on the other place. But then after we moved down here, of course, we were...
Talk about that. Didn't you live in Calhoun for a while, but you guys came out here?
I never did.
Oh, you never did, okay.
When we moved down here, we moved that granary down here from the other place. And my dad and I and Johnny stayed in the trailer, in the granary here. And my mom and them went to Calhoun, and they went to school in Calhoun, actually, and stayed up there for a year. But I stayed down here with my dad, and I think that's about the time Johnny joined the Army, right around that time. But we lived in this, but Mom come down about every day and stuff. But we only had the one room, and then we had the cook stove sitting outside, and Mom would go out and watch it. We did. She'd cook out under the trees, and we had no place to sleep. We had a hay rack sitting there with a load of hay on it, but at night we'd go sleep on the hay rack. That was just during that one summer, but we'd go sleep on the hay rack. If it rained, we'd just sleep under the hay rack, and we didn't know any better. Hell, it was fun.
And how old were you then?
Oh, 10, 12 years old. Well, I started high school when I was 12. Before that, I suppose 9, 10 years old. And of course, the rest of them were younger, and it was about that time, I think, that Johnny went to the Army. I don't remember exactly. But what have you missed now?
You're doing great. If you're getting tired, we can stop.
No, that's fine.
You're doing excellent. You're doing exactly what I need you to do.
I don't care.
Just keep talking.
Yeah. One thing leads to another,
That's fine.
Yeah.
That's what I need. Can we talk a little bit about maybe when your dad died?
Yeah.
That day, and then maybe how that affected you from then on out?
Well, I can remember when he died because we were all here, and Mom was, I don't know, I think she hollered for Johnny or somebody, and I don't even know if I think she made the kids stay in the other room, and they called the mortician or whoever it was. I can remember we came down. I remember him carrying him out and went, and I remember it was damn cold because we damn near froze to death at the cemetery when we buried down in Holy Sepulchre Cemetery. But it probably, because my intentions was when I went to high school, or went to down to prep to high school, was in the back of my mind, I always thought I would go over to Ames and take an engineering course, probably electrical engineer, that's kind of what I had in mind. But when he died, I think that kind of I probably still could have went, but in my own mind, I thought You know, it's out the window. So that's probably probably the most it affected me. And of course, you don't have your dad around anymore, you know. But it was a sad time, but don't seem like it was that. You know, it was more my mom that had the hard time. You know, the kids and you know, we didn't really realize what was going on, and we had Jim and Uncle Danny were both around, and or Jim, and so we kind of had somebody you could go and talk to or whatever, you know. But it was, yeah, it wasn't a happy time, but it wasn't like a catastrophe, I guess. Probably was for my mom. Well, I know it was for my mom, but you know, kids don't know any better.
Talk about your mom. What did you see? How she dealt with it, or what?
You mean when he died? I don't think she had any choice but to deal with it. You know, I mean, it's not like you just got up the next morning and had to do the same thing: get the kids to school and get to church and get the farming done. And we did that. At that time, we did have a bunch of cows, cattle. And we neighbors. Well, actually, Leahy's up in Blair took the cows. And they had some ground up north of Blair there, and they took the cows and pastured them up there for the rest of the winter. And the cows never came home. Evidently, we sold them from there because, you know, we just didn't have the time to take care of them or anything like that. And it was about that time that all we had was 2 old tractors to farm with. So I don't know where she got the money, but my mom bought us a new Super C tractor. We had that tractor that we farmed with, and with the horses, and then with the neighbors and Dan Kelly and some of the neighbors, they all pitched in, and we made it one way or another, you know. But I'm sure it had to be hard on my mom, but as far as, like I say, as kids, but she never really showed it that, you know, I mean, it was just one of the things you had to deal with, and she dealt with it, and that's.
I'm going to stop you right there. Tell me an accomplishment, what you want people to think of you that you're truly proud of.
When I really can't. Just the fact that I survived and raised a family, I guess, and raised at least 4 what I think are decent kids. You know, I don't have any major things that I can point to that I can build a monument to. I don't think, you know.
That's an Yvette question. I told you my family's too modest.
You just exist. That's it.
Tell me maybe your fondest or favorite childhood memory.
Boy, that's. You know, that's tough. I don't. All my. I mean, I don't have any negative thoughts about my childhood at all. You know, I mean, I remember like going riding with my dad, going off. You know, when I was real little, he was county commissioner, and I would go ride with him to when he was going checking on the road crews and things like that. And I remember going visiting different people and different parties and things like that, but that's nothing that really stands out that, you know, I would say I don't really have any negative thoughts about we just just existed, that's all. You run out of questions?
Yeah, I mean, is there anything else
I don't. Uh, like,
Anything else that you'd like to say? Anything you can think of, a story or anything?
well, if you get me going, I could probably come up with a lot of stories, but no, not really. I'm happy with what I've accomplished. You know, made it this far. I don't know how much farther I'm going to make it, but I'm being reasonably healthy and got me a farm and a house and family, and what more can you want, you know? So,
How would you describe yourself? What type of person did you become? See, I told you my family's too modest.
well, yeah, you know, that's tough, though. You know, you'd hope you think you was a honest, hard-working sort of person. That's about the only thing you can say. I mean, what, you know, I'm not. I guess that's what, that's what I'd like people to remember me as, you know, just an ordinary human being. You know, I don't think I've done anything to make me stand out, and you know, I'm not too outgoing. You know that. You know, and I've never really been interested in, like Mike and Tom and them. They were all on the school board and things like that. And I'd never been interested in anything like that, you know. I just pretty much like to stay in the shadows.
Anything else you'd like to say?
No, not really.
You good?
Good, yeah.
All right, we'll let you off the hook.
All righty, thank you.